It was just another quiet morning. The kind of morning that felt like every other, sunlight streaming through the window, the smell of coffee in the air, and the hum of normalcy surrounding me. But as soon as I opened the mailbox, everything changed. A plain white envelope. No return address. Just my name scrawled in messy handwriting across the front. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just junk mail or some kind of random advertisement. But something about it felt off. It wasn't the envelope itself, but the weight of it. It felt too purposeful. I hesitated for a moment before tearing it open. Inside, there was just a single sheet of paper, typed, not handwritten. No introduction. No greeting. Just raw, shocking details that made my heart skip a beat. She's been seeing him for months. Tuesday nights at the hotel. She told you she was working late, but she wasn't. She was with him. His name is Mark, and they've been meeting since January. I could barely breathe. My hands were shaking as I read and reread the letter. The words began to blur together, but the meaning hit me like a freight train. My wife, my partner for over 10 years, had been cheating on me. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the fact that someone out there knew the intimate details of her affair. Someone knew my wife better than I did. And they wanted me to know. Why? The letter didn't explain who sent it, but the implications were clear. Whoever it was, they knew. They had been watching. They knew when she was supposed to be working late, and they knew when she wasn't. They had proof that I hadn't wanted to see, but now I couldn't ignore. I felt the room spin as my thoughts raced. My mind went back to all those nights she said she was working late, all those hours I spent waiting for her to come home. I had trusted her. I believed her. Every time she walked out the door, I thought she was just doing her part. We had built this life together, a house, a family, everything. And now it was all collapsing, piece by piece, before my very eyes. I stumbled back inside, closing the door behind me as if somehow that could shield me from the storm that was now rushing in. My wife, Jennifer, was upstairs, likely still in bed. The kids were at school. My world was still on the outside of this room, still unaware of the chaos unfolding in my mind. What was I supposed to do with this letter? I couldn't just ignore it. I couldn't just pretend it wasn't real, even though part of me wanted to believe that it was some sick prank or a mistake. But deep down, I knew better. The letter was too specific. Too detailed. I couldn't just let it go. I had to know the truth. But how? I was paralyzed. Part of me wanted to confront Jennifer right then and there, but I couldn't. How could I? I wasn't even sure I could speak to her without completely breaking down. I couldn't think clearly. I was suffocating under the weight of everything I had just learned. But one thing was clear, I couldn't just sit back and wait for this to destroy me. The only thing I could do now was find out who sent this letter and confirm what it said. Because if it was true, nothing would ever be the same again. And as I stood there, staring at that piece of paper, I felt a rush of cold fear and fury. This was just the beginning. The worst part had yet to come. It's strange how much can change in an instant. One moment, everything is normal. The next, the life you thought you knew falls apart before your eyes. That was the reality I was waking up to, still clutching that damn letter in my hand. Jennifer, my wife, had always been the steady one in our relationship. She was calm, nurturing, dependable. We had built a life together. We had 2 kids, a house, a dog, and everything that makes a family look perfect on paper. We had fought through the ups and downs, built trust, shared secrets, and created memories. I never thought in a million years that the woman I married could betray me. But that's the thing about life, you never see the storm coming until it hits you. As I sat at the kitchen table, staring at that letter, I couldn't help but replay every moment that had led to this. Every time she told me she had to stay late at work, every time she was too tired for a date night, every time I felt that small, nagging suspicion in the back of my mind but brushed it aside. I should have paid attention. I should have known. But the truth is, I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe it. The kids were out of the house for the day, leaving me alone to wrestle with the chaos that had just been unleashed. My phone buzzed on the table, an incoming message from Jennifer. I stared at it, frozen. I wanted to text back, but I didn't know what to say. How could I send a simple message when everything between us had just come undone? Hi honey, I'm running a little late tonight. Hope everything's going okay at home. The words were so casual. So normal. So fake. I wasn't even sure why I felt so blindsided. The truth was right there in front of me, staring back from that letter. Yet, all I could think about was how much I wanted to pretend it wasn't true. How much I wanted to go back to the life we had before this morning, when everything was perfect and easy. But I couldn't. Not now. I looked back down at the letter again. The details were specific, clear, undeniable. The name of the man, Mark. The hotel, Riverside Inn. The times, every Tuesday night for months. It wasn't just a one-time mistake. This wasn't some drunken fling. This was an affair. A betrayal that had been going on for far longer than I'd ever imagined. It didn't make sense. Jennifer was everything I had ever wanted. She was kind, patient, loving. We had 2 beautiful children together. She had never shown any signs of being unhappy. We were a team, at least, that's what I thought. So, what had happened? What drove her to do this? I took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts. I knew that if I confronted her right now, I would fall apart. I couldn't let her see that. I had to be smart about this. I needed answers. And the only way to get them was to dig deeper. The investigation begins. The days following that letter were a blur. Each one felt like it dragged on longer than the last. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think about anything other than what I had just learned. My first move was to try and verify the information in the letter. I needed proof, something solid I could confront her with. The idea of blindly accusing her without being absolutely certain terrified me. I didn't know if I could handle the truth, but I knew I couldn't live with the doubt either. I started small, paying attention to the little things. I began to notice the small changes in Jennifer's behavior, the way she would always work late and avoid eye contact when she did, or how she had become increasingly distant. Nothing blatant, but when I pieced it all together, it felt like the jigsaw puzzle of my life had suddenly been shattered into a million pieces. One night, I decided to follow her. I knew it was wrong, but the urge to know the truth outweighed any sense of right or wrong at that moment. She was supposed to be going to work, but I followed her car instead. It felt like something straight out of a movie, but the reality was far more sinister. Jennifer didn't go to work. She drove straight to the Riverside Inn. I parked across the street and watched as she got out of her car and walked into the hotel. My heart pounded in my chest. I could hardly breathe. This was the moment I had been dreading, and yet, here I was. I wanted to turn around and leave, but my body wouldn't let me. I had to know if what the letter said was true. I sat there, barely able to think, as time seemed to stretch on forever. The hotel was quiet, and the parking lot was nearly empty. The only other car there was a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. It wasn't hers. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Jennifer came out. She was smiling, laughing even. And then Mark stepped out from behind her. He looked just as shocked to see me as I felt to see him. His face went pale, and Jennifer froze, her smile slipping from her face as she saw the look of horror on mine. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. Everything I thought I knew was crumbling around me. Jennifer tried to speak, but I couldn't hear her. My vision blurred, and all I could think about was the crushing weight of betrayal that slammed into me. How long had this been going on? How many times had she lied to me? How many nights had I spent alone, thinking she was working late, when she was here with him? I didn't wait for answers. I just turned around and left. I couldn't stay there. Not in that moment. I had seen enough. I knew the truth now. Jennifer was having an affair. The weeks that followed were a blur of emotion. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't focus. Every time I looked at Jennifer, I saw the lies. Every time I tried to speak to her, I felt the walls closing in around me. I couldn't escape the truth that had been thrust upon me. And yet, every part of me still held on to a tiny hope that I could somehow prove the letter was wrong, that I had misunderstood something. But deep down, I knew. I had seen it with my own eyes. I had seen her with him. Mark. The man who had taken everything from me. The man who had been living a double life, just like she had. It was all there, clear as day, and yet I couldn't bring myself to confront her, not fully. I wanted to. God, I wanted to tear the truth out of her. I wanted to make her see how much she had destroyed me. But something in me, something I couldn't explain, held me back. Was I still in love with her? Or was it just the idea of us, the life we had built together, that I couldn't let go of? But then, one evening, everything came crashing down. Jennifer came home late, as she had done countless times before, claiming she'd been caught up at work. But this time, I was prepared. I had spent the entire day piecing everything together, every lie, every inconsistency, every detail that didn't add up. I had to know, once and for all, if there was any chance of saving my marriage, or if it was beyond repair. I waited in the living room, the silence hanging heavy between us as she stepped through the door. She looked at me, confusion flickering across her face, her expression unreadable. "Hey," she said, her voice soft, almost apologetic. I didn't respond immediately. I couldn't. I stood up slowly, the weight of everything I knew pressing down on me. I didn't know what to say, but I knew I had to say something, anything. She looked at me, sensing the tension in the room. "What's wrong? You're acting strange." "Jennifer," I said, my voice trembling, "we need to talk." Her face paled, and she took a cautious step forward. "What about?" I took a deep breath and pulled the letter from my pocket. I didn't know why I felt like this letter held the power to expose everything, but I did. I handed it to her without a word. She glanced at the envelope, then at me, a flash of panic crossing her features. You opened it?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I had seen the truth with my own eyes. The betrayal was undeniable. The affair was real. And now, she was going to have to face it. Jennifer's eyes went wide as she read the letter, her hands shaking. She looked up at me, her lips trembling. "It's not what you think." Don't lie to me," I cut her off. "I saw you, Jennifer. I saw you with him at the hotel. I saw you with Mark." Her face drained of color. She staggered back as if the air had been knocked out of her. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice barely audible, breaking into a sob. "I didn't. I never meant to hurt you." "Then why did you do it?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Why? Was it me? Was I not enough for you?" She looked down, her shoulders trembling. "It's not you. It's not, you've always been enough." "But she paused, her words faltering. "I got lost somewhere along the way. I was looking for something I didn't even understand. I thought I could fix things. I thought I could fix myself." I shook my head, the anger and sadness mixing in a swirling storm. "Fix yourself? What about us? What about our family? What about the life we built together? I never meant for you to find out this way, Jennifer said, her voice breaking. But I was so scared of losing you that I kept going with him. I kept lying, thinking it would fix things. I didn't know how to stop. I could barely process her words. The betrayal was suffocating. I had been so blind, so trusting. How had she kept this from me for so long? How had she convinced herself that this was okay? But then, just as I was about to turn away, to walk out and leave her to her guilt and her lies, something unexpected happened. The doorbell rang. Jennifer froze, her face drained of color, and for a moment, we both stood there, unsure of what to do. Who could be at the door at this hour? I'll get it, she said, wiping her tears and moving toward the door. But I wasn't going to let her hide anymore. I was done. I was done with her lies, done with the uncertainty. I grabbed her wrist as she tried to reach for the door handle, stopping her in her tracks. No, I said, my voice cold. I'm not letting you walk away from this. Not again. Jennifer flinched, and for a moment, I saw the fear in her eyes. She had always been the strong one. But now, she was nothing more than a broken woman, caught in the web of her own lies. Who's at the door? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I already had a sinking feeling that I knew the answer. Jennifer's eyes darted to the door, and she stepped back, shaking her head. Please, she whispered, it's not what you think. Please don't. But I was already walking toward the door, pushing it open before she could stop me. And there, standing on the other side, was Mark. I felt the world tilt on its axis as the man I had never met, but who had taken everything from me, looked up at me with a face full of guilt and fear. He had the same look I had seen on Jennifer's face when she realized I knew the truth. Before I could say anything, before the words even formed in my mind, Mark spoke. I'm sorry, he said, his voice shaky. I never meant for any of this to happen. I couldn't even look at him. The rage inside me was so strong, it was all I could do to stay standing. But what he said next, what he admitted, shattered me completely. I'm the one who sent the letter, Mark said, his voice cracking. I couldn't live with what we were doing anymore. I had to tell you the truth. The revelation hit me like a sledgehammer. Mark had been the one to expose the affair. It wasn't Jennifer who had been caught in the act, she had been hiding it, yes, but it was him who had set everything into motion. Mark had destroyed my life. Mark stood there, his face pale, his eyes wide with regret. Jennifer, too, was frozen in place, looking more like a stranger than the woman I had once loved. The weight of the moment pressed down on me, suffocating, crushing everything I thought I knew. I had come to this point seeking answers, but the truth was too much to bear. It was too tangled, too complex. In trying to untangle one lie, I had unearthed 1,000 more. Mark's words echoed in my head, I'm the one who sent the letter. The confession hit me harder than anything Jennifer had said. The man standing before me wasn't just the catalyst for my wife's betrayal, he was also the one who had tried to fix what he'd helped destroy. But who was he really trying to save? Me? Or himself? Jennifer, shaking, couldn't meet my gaze. Her face was streaked with tears, and I could hear the tremor in her voice as she finally spoke. I'm sorry. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. Her voice broke, and for a moment, I thought she might collapse. But she didn't. She stood there, guilt and fear etched on her face. I had seen this woman stand tall through so many storms, but now, she was a shell of that person. She was broken, lost in a mess of her own making. I couldn't answer her right away. I felt numb. There was a part of me that wanted to scream, to unleash every ounce of pain and anger that had been building up since I'd first read that damn letter. But there was another part of me, the part that had once loved her deeply, that wanted to protect her, shield her from the consequences of her own actions. It was the same part of me that had let her get away with too much, the part that had turned a blind eye to the cracks in our relationship for too long. But what was left to protect? The thought lingered in my mind like a dark cloud. What was left of the life we had built together? The house? The memories? The children? Was that enough to hold on to? Was I willing to forgive all of this, to try to rebuild something that felt irreparably shattered? I turned away from Jennifer and Mark, my heart pounding in my chest. Every part of me screamed to walk away, to cut ties and never look back. But I knew deep down that it wasn't that simple. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about me, about how I had failed myself. I had allowed the love we had once shared to blind me to the truth, to the cracks that were slowly widening in the foundation of our marriage. Mark spoke again, his voice almost pleading. "Please, I'm sorry. I didn't know how else to fix it. I couldn't stand seeing you destroyed like this. I thought, maybe the truth was the only way out." His words were sincere, but they only added to the confusion swirling in my mind. How could I trust him? How could I trust anyone? In one moment, Mark had shattered my world by confessing his guilt, but in the same breath, he had exposed the depth of his own regret and shame. Was he truly sorry, or was he just trying to alleviate his own guilt? I looked at Jennifer, her tear-streaked face a silent plea for forgiveness. For a brief, fleeting moment, I wanted to forgive her, to reach out, to pull her close, and tell her it would all be okay. But I couldn't. The hurt ran too deep. It was too fresh. The betrayal was still too raw. I turned my gaze back to Mark, then back to Jennifer, as if waiting for one of them to say something that would make it all make sense. But they didn't. The silence between us was suffocating. Nothing could fix what had been broken. Jennifer took a step forward, her voice soft, barely audible. "I never wanted to hurt you, I swear. It's just that. I got lost. I didn't know who I was anymore. I was looking for something I couldn't find, and I thought," she trailed off, unable to finish. The words didn't matter anymore. I didn't answer her. I couldn't. What was there left to say? The truth had come out, but it didn't make anything clearer. It didn't make the pain go away. If anything, it made it worse. But there was one thing I knew for sure, I couldn't stay in this house with them anymore. I couldn't stay here and pretend everything was fine. The life I had built with Jennifer, our memories, our dreams, had crumbled into dust, and there was no putting it back together. "I need space," I finally said, my voice hoarse. "I need to think." I turned and walked toward the door, not looking back. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me as I left, but I didn't care. I needed to be alone. I needed time to figure out who I was now. Who I was without her. Outside, the night air felt cold, but I welcomed it. It numbed the pain, if only for a moment. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there, not with them. Not with the lies. I didn't know what the future held, whether I could ever rebuild from this, whether I would ever trust anyone again. But as I walked into the darkness, I realized something: the hardest part wasn't finding the truth. It was what came after. What do you do when the person you love betrays you? When everything you thought you knew about your life together turns out to be a lie? The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: would have to rebuild, piece by piece. And maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to forgive myself first. As the night swallowed me whole, I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew I had to find my own path forward, one that didn't include the lies, one that didn't include the broken promises. And I walked on, not knowing where I was headed, but knowing I couldn't go back.